For centuries, the Roman Empire stood as a colossus over the ancient world, its legions marching across continents, its banners unfurled in lands both familiar and foreign. The story of Rome's rise is often told as one of overwhelming military might, of disciplined soldiers and relentless conquests, but the true secret to Rome's enduring dominance was not just the strength of its armies or the sharpness of its swords. It was the extraordinary cunning, the relentless innovation, and the ruthless ingenuity that set Rome apart from every other civilization of its time. Behind every victory, behind every expansion of the empire's borders, there were minds at work, generals, engineers, and strategists who understood that brute force alone could never guarantee survival in a world of shifting alliances and unpredictable enemies. These were men who studied the terrain, who anticipated the enemy's every move, and who devised traps so clever and so deadly that they became the stuff of legend. The Romans were masters of psychological warfare, using deception, misdirection, and surprise to outwit their foes at every turn. Imagine the dense, shadowy forests of Germania, where Roman soldiers moved silently, blending into the mist and the trees. Here, the Romans turned the very landscape into a weapon, setting ambushes that would catch even the most vigilant enemy off guard. They used the cover of darkness, the confusion of unfamiliar terrain, and the element of surprise to devastating effect. These were not random acts of violence, but carefully orchestrated maneuvers, planned down to the last detail. And when it came to defending their own cities and fortresses, the Romans were equally inventive. Their siege engineers designed elaborate defenses, hidden pits lined with sharpened stakes, walls rigged with deadly mechanisms, and traps that could turn the tide of battle in an instant. These defenses were not just physical barriers, but psychological ones as well, instilling fear and uncertainty in any would-be attacker. The ingenuity of Roman military engineering was unmatched, and their traps became legendary throughout the ancient world. On the open battlefield, Roman soldiers were trained not only to fight, but to think like hunters. They set hidden snares in camouflaged pits, luring their enemies into carefully prepared kill zones. These traps were designed to disrupt enemy formations, sow chaos, and give the Romans a decisive advantage. Every detail was considered, from the placement of obstacles to the timing of the attack. The art of the trap was as much a part of Roman warfare as the gladius or the pilum. In this documentary, we will journey deep into the heart of Roman military strategy, uncovering the most ingenious and deadly traps ever devised by the empire's greatest minds. We'll examine authentic artifacts, consult with leading historians, and bring to life the tactics that made Rome's enemies tremble. These are not the myths of ancient storytellers, but real strategies documented in the annals of history and proven on the blood-soaked fields of battle. We'll see how these traps were conceived, how they were built, and how they changed the course of history. The legacy of Rome's ingenious traps is still felt today, echoing through the ruins of once great cities and the stories of empires that followed. These tactics were not just tools of war. They were the foundation upon which the greatest empire the world has ever known was built. Join us as we unravel the secrets of Rome's military genius and discover how cunning, creativity, and a willingness to outthink the enemy helped shape the destiny of civilization itself. Throughout the long and storied history of warfare, few battlefield maneuvers have stood the test of time quite like the double envelopment, more commonly known as the pincer movement. This tactic, which involves attacking an enemy force from both flanks simultaneously, is one of the oldest and most effective strategies ever devised. Its origins can be traced back to the earliest days of organized combat, when generals and warlords sought ways to outmaneuver and outthink their opponents on the field. The pincer trap is a testament to the enduring power of strategic thinking, and its legacy can be seen in battles across centuries and continents. While many ancient civilizations experimented with this maneuver, it was the Roman military machine that adopted the double envelopment with a level of deadly precision that set them apart from their rivals. The Romans were renowned for their discipline, organization, and ability to learn from both their victories and their defeats. They understood that a well-executed pincer movement could turn the tide of battle in an instant, trapping enemy forces and leaving them with nowhere to run. The Roman legions drilled relentlessly, perfecting their formations and timing so that when the moment came, they could strike with overwhelming force from multiple directions. The essence of the pincer trap is simple yet devastating. By advancing on both sides of an enemy formation, the attacking force can surround their opponents on three sides, effectively cutting off all avenues of retreat. The enemy, now hemmed in and unable to escape, is forced to fight on all fronts, often leading to confusion, panic, and ultimately, destruction. This maneuver not only breaks the enemy's lines, but also shatters their morale. The soldiers realize they are trapped with no hope of reinforcement or escape. The psychological impact of being encircled can be just as lethal as the physical threat itself. Perhaps the most famous and dramatic use of the double envelopment in ancient history occurred not at the hands of the Romans, but against them. In 216 BC, during the Second Punic War, the brilliant Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca executed a textbook pincer movement, the Battle of Cannae. Facing a much larger Roman army, Hannibal lured the Romans into a trap, allowing his center to fall back while his cavalry and infantry swept around both flanks. The result was catastrophic for Rome. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers were surrounded and slaughtered in one of the bloodiest days in military history. The name Cannae became synonymous with utter defeat and the dangers of underestimating a cunning opponent. The shock of Cannae reverberated throughout the Roman world. Rather than succumbing to despair, the Romans responded with characteristic determination. They meticulously studied every detail of the battle, analyzing what went wrong and how such a disaster could be avoided in the future. Roman generals and strategists pored over maps and reports seeking to understand the genius of Hannibal's tactics. They realized that the double envelopment, when executed with discipline and timing, could be a weapon of immense power. Determined never to be caught off guard again, the Romans began to incorporate the pincer movement into their own military doctrine, adapting and refining it for their unique style of warfare. In the years that followed, the Roman legions became masters of the pincer trap. They drilled their soldiers relentlessly, ensuring that every man knew his role in the complex choreography of battle. The lessons of Cannae were not forgotten. Instead, they became the foundation of a new era of Roman military dominance. The double envelopment was no longer just a tactic. It was a doctrine, a symbol of Rome's ability to learn, adapt, and ultimately to conquer. The classic pincer trap remains a powerful reminder of the importance of strategy, discipline, and the relentless pursuit of victory on the battlefield. Nature became a Roman ally. Forests like Teutoburg were both a warning and inspiration. After suffering defeat in Germania, the Romans began staging their own ambushes in wooded terrain. Small auxiliary forces would lure enemies into choke points where hidden units waited in silence behind underbrush and earthworks. The fake retreat is one of the oldest tricks in the book. Roman cavalry would feign a retreat, drawing eager enemies into a pre-selected area where Roman infantry waited in silence. The enemy, thinking they had won, would charge into a death trap. Under cover of darkness, the Romans staged false campfires to mislead scouts. While the enemy encircled the wrong camp, the real Roman army attacked from behind. Night warfare required supreme discipline, which gave Rome an edge. Roman generals predicted enemy escape routes. At Pydna and Zama, retreating enemy forces were boxed in by flanking units or terrain traps. Roman cavalry closed escape corridors, killing thousands. Caltrops and tribuli were small but lethal. Laid in high grass or dirt roads, they disabled cavalry and slowed infantry. Variations included poisoned tips and wooden replicas hidden among debris. Roman engineers, they built trenches lined with sharp stakes called Cipi and Lilia. These clever defences were put to use during Caesar's siege of Alesia, making it nearly impossible for cavalry to break through. Layers of these obstacles arranged in concentric circles made any approach incredibly difficult. When you picture the entrance to a Roman fort, you might imagine a grand, open gateway welcoming visitors, but in reality, these entrances were intentionally narrow, designed with defense as the top priority. The Romans were masterful engineers, and every detail of their fort served a strategic purpose. The gates were often just wide enough for a single cart or a few soldiers to pass through at a time, forcing any would-be attackers to funnel into a tight, controlled space. This bottleneck made it nearly impossible for large groups to rush in all at once, giving defenders a huge advantage. But the narrowness was just the beginning. Roman gates were often rigged with a variety of deadly traps and clever defensive features. Above the entrance, there were overhead kill zones, openings in the ceiling or walls, sometimes called murder holes, that allowed defenders to attack from above. Archers and slingers, stationed on the battlements, had the perfect vantage point to rain down arrows, javelins and stones on anyone trying to force their way in. These kill zones were carefully positioned to maximize the damage to attackers while keeping the defenders safe and out of reach. The defenders didn't just rely on arrows and stones, they also used boiling oil, hot sand, and even heavy objects like logs or boulders, which could be dropped directly onto the heads of invaders. The psychological impact of these defenses was just as powerful as the physical damage. Attackers knew that even if they managed to breach the outer gate, they would be stepping into a deadly trap. The gates themselves often opened into small, enclosed courtyards, essentially kill boxes, where invaders would be trapped with no easy escape. Roman soldiers could attack from all sides, while the attackers were left exposed and disoriented. With no cover to hide behind and nowhere to run, invaders were at the mercy of the Roman defenders. The combination of narrow entrances, overhead kill zones and deadly traps made Roman forts some of the most secure and intimidating structures of the ancient world. These ingenious defenses are a testament to the Romans' understanding of both engineering and psychology, turning every gate into a formidable obstacle that could break the will of even the most determined enemy. During sieges, defenders would, quite ingeniously, build loose stone walls meant to collapse on enemy climbers. Sometimes even ladders and battering rams captured from attackers were sabotaged, using weak wood or joints designed to break under pressure. So Rome became absolute masters of countermining. When enemies tried to tunnel under their walls, the Romans would dig side tunnels of their own, aiming to collapse those enemy shafts. Sometimes they'd even use smoke, fire, or, believe it or not, bees to force the attackers out of those hidden tunnels. In several campaigns, Roman engineers would actually redirect rivers to flood enemy camps. And in other cases, they poisoned water supplies by dumping dead animals or toxins upstream. Siege warfare was honestly brutal, and the traps weren't just physical, but biological as well. The Romans also built false camps, false walls, and even fake siege engines to trick their enemies. These clever decoys wasted enemy resources and drew attacks away from the real fortifications, making the Romans' defenses even more effective. In rare cases, Romans constructed underground death chambers under breached gates. When attackers entered, the floor collapsed and they were trapped in spike-lined pits. Fire was both weapon and trap. Romans used pitch-soaked bundles that ignited on contact. Arrows launched from Scorpios lit enemy camps ablaze in minutes. The Romans crucified rebels along highways and left bodies unburied as warnings. Defectors were sent back maimed or mutilated to break morale. It wasn't just war, it was psychological domination. Rome used scouts and deserters to feed false information. They would, either inflate or minimize the size of their forces. Decoy legions sometimes marched in plain sight to distract the enemy, while the real army quietly moved elsewhere. Rome also relied on infiltrators to open gates or, just cause confusion behind enemy lines. There were even times when some units pretended to surrender only to strike suddenly at the very heart of enemy leadership. Even the appearance of Roman discipline acted as a trap. Many tribes surrendered without a fight when Roman formations approached, only to be betrayed, taxed, or, even enslaved. Each example showcases Rome's mastery of planning, misdirection, and terrain control. These weren't mere battles, they were engineering marvels and psychological puzzles. Roman traps influenced medieval castles, trench warfare, and modern ambush tactics. Their designs were so effective, some still inspire military engineers today. Rome conquered with strategy, deception, and deadly traps. From hidden ditches to battlefield feints, their mastery of war was rooted not just in power, but in brilliance. Subscribe for more ancient history documentaries, and honestly, never underestimate the power of a well-set trap.